Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. My name is Peter Counter and I am the editor-in-chief of FindBiometrics and Mobile ID World, where we are preparing for our September special event, Digital Transformation and the Enterprise, which will lead into our coverage of the ISC West 2020 virtual event running October 5th through 7th. ISC West is the subject of this episode of ID Talk, in which my co-host Susan Stover, Vice President of Digital Content for FindBiometrics, interviews conference organizer Will Weiss, Group Vice President at Reed Exhibitions. The conversation delves into what we can expect from the virtual edition of the world's premier security conference, including a preview of the FindBiometrics panel, Enabling Digital Transformation with Biometrics and Mobile ID. Weiss also provides insight into the emerging fraud threats during this current period of accelerated digital transformation, and how remote work is affecting the converged security landscape, before speculating on the future of biometrics in security. This episode is a great way to set the stage for both the FindBiometrics September editorial event and October's virtual ISC West 2020 conference. So without further ado, I am pleased to present Susan Stover in conversation with ISC West organizer Will Weiss, right here on ID Talk.
Welcome to ID Talk. I'm Susan Stover, VP of Digital Content here at FindBiometrics, and today I'm joined by Will Weiss, Group Vice President, Security Events Portfolio, Reed Exhibitions. Welcome back to the podcast, Will.
Thanks, Susan. Nice to be talking here as the interesting year we're in progresses to the next phase.
Absolutely. Speaking of next phases, here at FindBiometrics, we've attended and participated in ISC West for years now. And in these unprecedented times, we're looking forward to the all-virtual event occurring October 5th to 7th, 2020. What can attendees expect from this year's event?
Yeah, it's obviously been an interesting year where, initially ISC West was going to be in its normal time in the spring and, for obvious reasons, not able to do the face-to-face, but we are enthusiastic and getting a lot of interest in the ISC West virtual event, which will be October 5th through 7th. So it's definitely going to have a heavy education and thought leadership element to it. There also will be a really good exhibitor resources tech center where people can interact with, vendors and attendees can interact and set up time together and also download information, but also some good networking activities. This is one of the challenges, but in celebrating some of the successes, but also looking forward with networking activities. But we are rolling out the details, promptly very soon on the conference speakers and details. But a couple things I wanted to highlight. We've got some fantastic keynote speakers that'll be part of the virtual event. One of those who was also going to be at the live event, but we're really, really grateful they can do the keynote at the virtual event, is Michael McKenzie. He's General Manager for IoT Connectivity and Control Services for Amazon Web Services. So he's going to do a terrific keynote on the edge of transformation, how to secure the connected future with IoT. So that's going to be a great keynote speaker. Another speaker we're really pleased who's able to do the keynote for the virtual event is Charles Burns. He's head of global security for Uber. That should be quite interesting, obviously, given their mobility prowess, but obviously all the changes in their business. And he also has facilities security background, so that should be quite interesting. And then one other keynote I wanted to highlight is the Department of Homeland Security, their Science and Technology Division, is going to do a town hall meeting style keynote with several high-level speakers. So that should be really timely as well. And then, Susan, very pleased that you've helped head up a panel for one of the breakout sessions. But just to give everybody a little bit of an idea of the major themes for breakout sessions that we're doing. And again, just like the physical shows, we're working closely in partnership with Security Industry Association, our premier sponsor for ISC events. But some of the key breakout session themes will be access and ID management as one of the core ones, video surveillance, cybersecurity and IT, security design and risk management, and then some of the bigger picture themes like security megatrends. I wanted to just reference a couple sessions that I'm looking forward to, and then definitely going to have you share with the audience more on the session you're heading up. But one of the breakout sessions within the cybersecurity and IT track is going to be on the convergence area. So how to protect your organizations from cyber physical attacks. We've got a really good security, more IT security speaker for that. Another session I think is very timely and also relevant for your audience is a session under our megatrends theme, strengthening relationships between security and privacy. As we know, and I happen to live in California, pretty major and strict things like the California Consumer Privacy Act and GDPR. So a lot of issues that our whole community, whether you're a digital or IT expert or physical security, we all need to be in tune with. And then, one of the things that we're looking to do is certain vertical industries obviously are evolving really dramatically. Another breakout session I'm looking forward to under strategic management is resources, partnerships, and technology for K through 12 school security. So a lot of good sessions, and definitely really appreciate that you're bringing together a great session as well. So if you want to touch on that a bit, I would love to have you share that with the audience.
Well, thank you, Will. We're really looking forward to speaking at ISC West once again, and looking forward to the virtual panel. We'll be looking at enabling digital transformation with biometrics and mobile ID. Digital transformation has been sweeping the enterprise for some years now, and now the timing couldn't be more perfect to talk about these solutions. Businesses of all sizes are embracing biometrics and mobile ID to smoothly transition into the next generation of business, and we're looking at how the core of digital transformation is user identity and authentication. We'll be looking at the technologies that are keeping identity at the center of digital transformation in the enterprise, and looking at how work is being redefined to mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, creating demand for hybrid office solutions, legacy security systems, and that are more vulnerable than ever before. And we're really excited to really highlight how biometrics and mobile ID are bridging the gap between physical and digital spaces, enabling stronger security and greater accountability and a more efficient workplace ready to tackle whatever the new normal holds. So
good. Yeah, that sounds terrific. And thank you so much for being part of it. It is really interesting. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about this in some of our next topics here coming up. But the convergence of security and health technology, right? This is kind of just the new normal everybody's going to be mapping out. So I think you're covering a lot of those key elements on that spectrum.
It's really proliferated across a whole range of vertical markets. You really can't deny how this is affecting the transformation of the enterprise. And given the COVID-19 pandemic response, we've seen a global shift in how we think about security, identity, and privacy, especially when it comes to remote work and identity playing a major role in facilitating the remote workplace. What do you see as the most pressing security and fraud threats facing enterprises in the era of digital transformation?
I think it was interesting as the springtime developed, realities of March and April, but to now it's like, wow, every week I'm reading an article about, major organizations whose policies have completely changed, and not just for a few months, but for the long term, of no longer necessarily requiring all their workers to be in one single location or in the office, but more flexible, people in the office, people working remotely, people working at home. And that is, we touched on this a few months ago, but it really is putting pressures, but also I think a lot of innovation into how do you manage all the platforms that you have for people that are working remotely, but then also when it comes to people now coming into the physical office space again, that's a whole new layer of confirming the appropriate access control, again, the health technology that have to be built in. Our organization, Reed Exhibitions, we have a sizable workforce, but people going into our headquarter office now, they have to pre-register the day before. So there's new systems, new mobile apps, new platforms, and a lot of organizations I've talked to say they have new security vetting protocols for every platform you're using. You better be really sure that data security of all the people in your ecosystem is rock solid, and that can be really tough. And then I think we're seeing it everywhere, just mobility, mobile devices is been progressing obviously in our space, but some of the hottest companies in the news are ones with mobile-based solutions for access control, and then obviously the apps and customer experience. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation from that, but also very quickly products that literally integrate security and health technology, like I was mentioning before. So it's interesting. One of the other sectors I work on is for the casino gaming industry. that's going to transform dramatically already in terms of technologies being used, touchless payments, just the whole experience in hospitality, and then transportation. We also cover that sector with events as well. So there's a lot of changes on the horizon, and that integration of security and health technology, and then ID and access control. So it should be, I think, a very interesting momentum building the rest of this year. But then as we get back to face-to-face events at some point in 21, I think there'll be hopefully a lot of good case studies and success stories we can work off of.
With the pandemic pushing so much activity into digital channels and raising the issue of digital security for so many organizations, to what extent do you think these changes are temporary, and what extent will they be permanent?
Maybe some traditional organizations will be more temporary, but I do think many technology-driven organizations, which obviously is the case for so many verticals, retail, financial, you go down the list, I do think it's going to be a permanent transformation for the majority relative to how to do things. And that is going to be notable relative to what we talked about. I think we've already heard from some of the major big tech companies, like you said, it's like, oh, they have a permanent remote workforce policy and flexibility. And so that's even interesting on managing the workforce of where people are, working from at a certain time. If they're going to customer locations, how do you kind of monitor that, make sure there's safety involved? But then, definitely, forcing the digital identity tools to be extremely robust. So I really think it's going to be permanent changes. We'll see if that goes all the way down to whether we do handshakes or not in the future. But I think this time next year, it'll be interesting to have this chat again of, wow, what really has transformed, especially as more public events and things like that start to happen over time.
And when we spoke a few months ago, which feels much longer ago than just a few months, but we spoke about how ISC West is known for setting the benchmark annually for discussions around what's become known as converged security. You touched on this a bit earlier, but how have you seen the converged security trend evolve in just the last few months?
I think it's accelerated to what might have been another couple-year journey for organizationally departments working together. I think there's been good successes of IT, operations, executive buy-in, the digital experts, the facilities people, but I'm seeing that from our own organization, but then a lot of the customers that we talk to about projects that they're working on really has accelerated, and to me that's a good thing. It's an interesting dichotomy where all of us are working remotely and having to do con calls and Zoom calls, but I've seen it actually force even more internal partnerships between cross-functional teams saying, well, we're being tasked with doing things so differently, just from a liability perspective, a career growth perspective for skill sets, saying that we need to get cross-trained on the digital to physical dynamic. And then, like we said, just by nature of facilities / remote work, it's accelerating dramatically. And when I think about sort of operational type verticals, whether it's, big automotive manufacturing plants or major transportation systems, all that is getting transformed pretty dramatically. So it will be interesting to see there, but that is, like you said, with ISC West and our other events, it's for a couple of years now been one of the hottest topics. But I think we will see more than ever that the old talk of, oh, everything's in a silo. As we get into the end of next year, I don't think people will even be talking about, the siloed approach versus more of the command center or comprehensive nature of things.
And like we spoke about for the virtual event in October, FindBiometrics will be presenting an expert panel on enabling digital transformation with biometrics and mobile ID. How do you see the trend towards biometrics and mobile ID having an impact on the enterprise security landscape?
Yeah, it's interesting. We touched on it like when we met up at ISC West 2019 and then talking earlier this year on the podcast. It just, I will be really surprised if biometrics isn't part of almost every access control solution, even more so going forward. And I think that is exciting. I mean, maybe a couple of years ago, people were like, oh, wow, am I really going to use my mobile phone or enable employees to use a mobile phone for elements? But then also getting into, okay, let's face it, there's going to be even more development of facial recognition and retina scans versus, people touching things. So I think it's going to, because it does tie into health again. So I think it's already been exciting development the last couple of years. As we know at ISC West, and so many more solutions, large numbers of solutions with biometrics built in. Again, I think it's a year from now and into 22, it will actually be for sure the norm, not an exception, which is good. There is a lot of talk too, of course, on how the cybersecurity risks with any devices. That's got to be continued to be front burner as a concern. We also know there's so much talk about components and product design and things like that. So yeah, I think very quickly becoming a norm for this landscape, and that's a good opportunity. And that also means be hard pressed to see any of the major companies in the physical security convergence space not having a part in it.
Well, it was so great to talk to you today, and we're really looking forward to the event in October. In the meantime, where can our listeners learn more about the upcoming all-virtual ISC West event and more information about the ongoing matchmaking opportunities and education, ISC news, and more?
Yeah, so as people will be hearing this, we will just rolled out formally the details of the virtual event speakers and sessions and kind of what the format will be. So the best place, where people can navigate from that is simply iscwest.com. You mentioned our ongoing year-round sort of matchmaking services we're doing for security professionals who have open projects and would love to get recommendations on solutions or, exhibiting type companies that might fit to projects. We do have a section of, if you go to iscwest.com under what's called the Discovery Zone, that is where there's a major tab on our matchmaking services that we're providing. And it's been a little bit of a revelation, right? 3 years ago, as an event-centric company, we do a lot of VIP personalization, enabling meetings at the show. We've had strong interest from major security professionals at Fortune 1000 type organizations saying, we'd love to have you facilitate some of that matchmaking of buyer and seller. So the Discovery Zone on iscwest.com is a great place to go. And I actually was looking at a few more details this morning under specifically some of our top attendees that we have relationships with who specifically specified open projects with biometrics interest. A lot of range of really big organizations. Big telecom company in Vietnam was one who specified an open project. A couple of very large system integrators, major casino branch, retail organization, financial services, and major university. So definitely that's where people can check out both sort of audience and solution providers can check that out. And then just overall for all of our content, of which you guys are a great contributor with articles and content, iscnews.com, where we cover industry trends. So that would be the other place to go.
It was great speaking with you today, Will. It's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Susan. Much appreciated.
And so concludes Susan Stover's conversation with Will Weiss, Group Vice President at Reed Exhibitions. To learn more about the ISC West 2020 virtual event and how to register, please visit iscwest.com. And for more news, interviews, and featured articles covering the world of converged security and biometrics, visit FindBiometrics.com and our sibling site, MobileIDWorld.com. I'd like to thank Will once again for joining us on today's episode, and thank you to my co-host Susan Stover for conducting the interview. Our podcast theme music is by Logomrad. I have been your host, Peter Counter. Thank you for listening to the ID Talk podcast.